Thank you for listening to the Working Together Vice President Standards and House Chairman webinar. My name is Jenna Wiesner, and I am one of the two assistants to the Director of Standards. I'm responsible for Regions 5, 6, 7, and Theta Province. My Kappa volunteer roles have included being a chapter advisor in many different capacities and serving as a Province Director of Chapters for Epsilon South Province. I went to the University of Iowa, and my husband and I live in our hometown, Peoria, Illinois. I work in client and community relations at PNC Bank. Presenting with me is Missy Osha, the Regional Director of Chapters for Region 5, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Missy, and I have been a chapter advisor, just like Jenna, in various capacities. I was a Province Director of Chapters for Delta South, and I spent 2 years as the Assistant to the Director of Standards. I am married. I met my husband after graduation, and I work as a pharmacist for Indiana University Health Home Care Pharmacy.
Great, thank you, Missy. So during this webinar, we will clarify the relationship between the VPS and the House Chairman. We will go over House rules, closing hours, having male guests in the chapter facility, the visitation policy, and the live-in rule. We will also explain the process for room and roommate assignments, when and how to refer a member to the standards committee, and also the details behind the chapter emergency procedures team. So I will now turn it over to Missy to touch on House rules.
Okay, so the House rules are basically the skeleton or backbone, so to speak, of what the House Chairman follows. These House rules will ensure that all members are following the same rules, and we want to make sure that they are aware of them, and they should be included in the chapter standing rules. Another good idea to do is at the beginning of either the fall semester or both semesters to print out a copy of the House rules and have a signature line on them. Have each of your members sign that and turn that back in. That's just another little step in accountability, and make sure that they have read over that. So that if there are any violations that have to be reported to the House Chairman, you do have that as, remember, you read this in the House rules, you violated that rule, so that's why we're having our discussion. Any violations of House rules should be reported to the House Chairman first. It's up to her to decide if this offense needs to be referred on to the Standards Committee, or if it is something that she can assign possibly a job jar or ask the member to do something else to help out for the House Committee. The House Committee is going to refer to the Standard Committee matters involving violations of fraternity standards, chapter House rules, visitation policy, or any health concerns. I do want to make sure you understand the House rules are developed by the House Chairman in consultation with Chapter Council and House Board and House Director. Okay. Closing hours and guests. So closing hours, they should be conducive to academic achievement, consideration of others, and safety. Closing hours can also be described as these are times when we do not have public hours. So you should have a set amount of that time for your chapter where it is okay to have guests over, and they can be in the public areas. This could be from 10 a.m. to midnight each day, whatever it may be. But these are in your public areas of your house. Male guests are not allowed in any of our facilities after closing hours. We do want to make sure that this facility is locked at all times. This is very, very important. This is a safety concern, and we want to make sure that we don't have anyone coming in and out of the house when they should not be, especially people that should not be in there. We do have an overnight guest registration form that we ask that you fill out for any of your female guests that are staying overnight. This is another safety issue and an accountability issue. If there were to be an emergency and the house needed to be evacuated, it's a good idea to know that there's extra people in the house that we need to make sure that we can account for if we do have to evacuate. And we also ask that all guests are informed of the house rules. Do remember, it is just like when you take a guest to a social event. You are responsible for your guests and for them following our house rules. Okay. Visitation policy. This can sometimes get a little confusing, so we just want to make this very brief and to the point. Visitation involves whenever we have male visitors allowed in our chapter facility in non-public areas. This is including, say, it's times that on Friday and Saturday evening from 7 p.m. to midnight you allow men up into the private areas of the chapter facility. This also includes if you have dads, alums, husbands of alums coming to the house for homecoming, for parents' weekend, anything like that. We want to make sure that we are aware of that. The main reason for this is for our insurance. If we say that we don't have any male visitors in the home and then there's an accident, something happens to a male visitor, our insurance may question what is happening there. The visitation policy is applied for every year. There is not a blanket policy that XYZ chapter is fine and they don't need to ever apply for visitation again. It is done every year, and you do this in consultation with the PDC and the Director of Standards, and your house board and your advisory board must both approve, this request. Enforcement of the visitation policy is the responsibility of the house chairman. And all forms and instructions for this are available on the website under the house chairman. And just as before, any infractions of the visitation policy should be referred to the standards committee. The live-in rule. So each chapter must have a live-in rule because it is a policy and an expectation that we will keep our chapter facilities full. This is an expectation of all members of CAPA. The live-in rule must be included in your chapter standing rules. Maximum capacity of your facility is determined by local fire regulations. So a fire inspector would determine how many women could live in the chapter facility. Then the house board can go back and determine what minimum capacity is. Most house boards consider this to be about 90% of the maximum, and this is based on the minimum amount of money that can be brought in that they feel that they can continue to run the house or the chapter facility without having to dip into their reserves. Exceptions to your live-in rule are granted by the advisory board, and those are not always granted, but definitely a big deal if the chapter facility is not full. As I said before, it's the responsibility of every member to ensure the facility is filled to capacity at all times. You do want to make sure that your new members sign the new member commitment to live in. It's a good idea. They sign this and they hand it back in, but it would be a really great idea to have a second copy of that for them to keep, just so that they know what they are signing. They can share this with their parent, whatever. You do want to keep that new member commitment to live in on file. If by chance you would have a new member who decides that they don't want to live in the following year, you would have this to remind them that, yes, they signed a commitment to live in. Again, if that became an issue, that would be a referral to the standards committee. The house chairman should also develop and have members sign a housing contract. So hold them accountable and keep on file for the duration of their membership. The housing contract is between the chapter and the member. So the member signs and says, yes, I will live in the chapter, I will follow these rules, and this is how much I will pay. We suggest keeping that on file for the duration of their membership in case there are any questions or concerns, anything that arises after the member has lived in. We do have a copy of their contract on file. In the housing contract, there is a section that specifies who can conduct room searches. Usually this is specified as the house board can because they are renting the facility to the chapter and through the chapter to the chapter members. The house board can allow the standards committee to conduct room searches in their place. That is perfectly fine for them to do. It is suggested that when you do a room search, you at least have 2 people that are looking in the rooms, Preferably, if you could have a couple more, if you could have an advisor present, that is always a good idea also. And I think that's all I have on the live-in rule. I will hand it back over to Jenna.
Great, thank you, Missy. So we will move on to the room and roommate assignments. So the room and roommate assignments should always be conducted by the house chairman, the vice president standards, and the house and standards advisors. So those two officers and their advisors are responsible for handling all room and roommate assignments and using the input that they receive from your chapter members. These can be assigned by personal choice, seniority, or an activity points system. So in the House Chairman Leadership Guide, there is a suggested terms for point systems. And this is what, if you do choose to use a point system, this is what you need to follow and what you need to use. And you would want to also make sure that this is in your chapter documents, your bylaws and standing rules, so that every member is aware of how the room picks may occur. So if you do want to add any additional terms to what's listed in the House Chairman Leadership Guide, you would need to get approval from your province director of chapters. So a couple examples from there would be, you could get points for academic class, or if you're an officer or a standing committee chairman, there's a couple ways you could get points for each semester that you've lived in your chapter facility, or maybe not having any unexcused absences from your chapter meeting. So there's lots of different ideas outlined in the leadership guide. So we suggest that you take a look there and see if that's something that you could implement in your chapters. One thing too that's good to note is that you may end up seeing a lot of ties between members when you use this point system. And so it's a good reminder to know that all ties would be broken through a lottery drawing. I know that I've seen that problem get run into a few times. So a lottery drawing would be used for any ties. All right, moving on. We've mentioned a couple times throughout our presentation when you would need to refer someone to standards. So I'll just go over it again to make it clear. So any violations that occur within your chapter facility, whether it be house rules, visitation, or the live-in rule, would be first reported to the house chairman. The house chairman would then talk to the member and see if she could just give a warning or instruction on what to do in the future if it wasn't anything too serious. Maybe someone just didn't clean up after themselves or something like that. That could be something that the house chairman and her committee could probably take care of themselves. Also, after a predetermined number of offenses, or if the offense is severe enough, that's when you'd want the house chairman to refer that member to standards. Maybe your chapter has a 3-strike rule and then they're sent to standards, or maybe this member, it's suspected that she stole something from another member's room, or she had a boy sleepover. Those are pretty serious offenses, and those would warrant immediate referral to the standards committee. So we want to make sure that the house chairman and her committee are well aware of all of our fraternity standards, the chapter house rules, the visitation, or any health concerns that get brought to their attention. We want to make sure that all of those things are communicated to the standards committee in a timely fashion. So if someone is ultimately referred to the standards committee, as always, the standards committee should really try and get to the root of the problem and talk to the member and figure out what's causing the problem. Why is she acting out? Is there a particular reason why a boy has been sleeping over at the house, a few times, or why is she stealing something from someone else, or was there alcohol found in her room? Try to get to the root of the problem as best as you can. We've put some probation term ideas that are also listed in the guidelines, the suggested guidelines and probation terms form that is on the CAPA website. So we've picked out a few good ideas from that document that you can use for any sort of house rules or live-in rules that might be broken. You could make a presentation to the standards on the importance of the house rules, or you could maybe organize a door decorating contest or organize an all-house fire drill. Those are just a couple ways that that member who's called in to standards could use her probation wisely to learn more about the House rules and hopefully benefit the whole chapter by informing everyone about the different rules that they need to be following. If it is something that's a little bit more serious, such as theft or an eating disorder or an emotional issue that's been brought to the attention of the House chairman and then ultimately to the Standards Committee, there's also a lot of other good probation ideas in those guidelines. And I also suggest that you get your province director of chapters involved immediately for things that are serious like that, just so that we make sure we're handling the problem in the best way possible. So speaking of more serious issues, the House chairman and the vice president standards are actually both members of the chapter emergency procedure team. So we just wanted to touch on that briefly. In an event that an emergency involving an accident, an injury, or a death of a CAPA member, or any physical damage to the chapter facility occurs, the House chairman and or the VPS, I guess, should notify the House director and close the facility to everyone except members and emergency personnel. And if it is a physical damage that occurs to the structure, we want to make sure that the chapter does evacuate the facility and accounts for all members. So that's where it's really important that the House chairman and the VPS know who lives in the house and have some sort of buddy system so that you know if your roommate is there. The chapter council advisor, the standards advisor, and or the director of standards should always be contacted to address the situation, along with the regional director and PDC. As many people that you can just let know of this, the better. It's also always important reminder to know that you shouldn't talk to any media. So if something does happen in the chapter facility and media reaches out to you, make sure that you're not communicating with them. That's something that the vice president of our fraternity would do. And your chapter council advisor, standards advisor, and director of standards would be able to help you through that process with the vice president of our fraternity. So those are just a few things. The other things are outlined in the House chairman and the VPS leadership guides that go over safety procedures and dealing with emergencies. So you can take a look at that to get some more clarification. We've also just added some keys to success just to kind of wrap up everything that we've said. So as always, communication is key. It's very important that a member of the standards committee serves as a liaison to the House chairman or someone on her committee. We want to make sure that that liaison in the standards committee is communicating on a weekly basis with the House chairman or a committee member so that everyone's on the same page and that standards issues can be resolved in a timely fashion. As always, use confidentiality when addressing member issues, no matter what the situation is. We just always want to make sure that the member feels comfortable in your presence. As always, safety is a priority for all members involved, and make sure that the facility is safe for everyone living in. And again, just make sure that if you do use a point system, that you're using the suggested point system in the House Chairman Leadership Guide. We just thought that would be important to note once again. So at this time, that's all we have for you, and we hope that you found this helpful. If you ever have any other questions or need clarification, you can always reach out to Missy or myself, or your province director of chapters or regional director would be happy to help. So thanks for your time.